In the blaze of candlelight, Cecily felt every eye upon her bright, greedy eyes sparkling in the gilded mirrors. Sharp, measuring eyes slid sideways behind fluttering fans. The Grafton ballroom, for all its fresh bouquets and polished marble underfoot, hummed with the same charged anticipation that marked every first ball of the season. The clock chimed 8, but already the air was rich with ribbons and rumours. She stood sentinel beside her stepfather, Lord Allenby, whose figure filled his formal coat as a general's might, imposing, inflexible, given to crisp gestures and an air of ever-binding command. His gaze, as sharp as any drawn sword, rarely left the crowd, but tonight it sought out one face in particular. "Do not slouch, Cecily," he murmured, voice clipped, eyes fixed across the room. "He'll notice posture, among other things." The he in question required no introduction. Baron Lemoyne, the evening's unspoken centrepiece, was a dark-haired man in a sapphire frock coat, the Grafton estate's choicest plum newly come into fortune, solid in stature and, of course, unencumbered by any attachment aside from that which their set hoped to secure. Cecily straightened, smoothing trembling fingers down the pale blue silk of her skirts. The ball's warmth was oppressive, stolen from so many perfumed bodies, packed tight as peonies in a vase. Laughter and the clink of glasses rang from the north gallery, and music began anew, a gentle waltz, as ephemeral as moth's wings. "I trust you understand what is at stake," her stepfather said quietly now, not quite looking at her. "Do not appear so grave." She tried, valiantly, not to appear so grave, and tucked a polite smile onto her lips. "Of course, sir," she replied. In truth, dread prickled beneath her chemise, heavy and hot. She had memorized every one of Baron Lemoyne's reported merits: his estate in Hampshire, his indifferent taste in horses, his rumoured penchant for lemon cakes, yet none seemed to touch the chasm between them. She had first glimpsed him only at a distance, departing his carriage, tall and self-assured, his conversation as measured as the gold on his cufflinks. The orchestra's tune trailed through the air. An older lady in taffeta introduced herself to Cecily, remarking that the Grafton Ball was, as ever, a barometer for the entire London season. Cecily let herself drift through the motions, incline the head, murmur the necessary pleasantries, pretend not to sense her stepfather's calculating glance when the Baron himself appeared in the crowd. Lemoyne's approach was announced by an almost physical hush. Partners glanced over their shoulders, conversation stilled. Shadows chased across his strong chin as he came closer, his lips set in his signature, polite smile, eyes alert with gentlemanly attention. Cecily's heart hammered against her stays, stifling her very breath. She should curtsy, say something clever, but her mind spun with the awareness that this was not a meeting between equals. She was, in her stepfather's eyes, a means to an end, and in the Baron's, an ornament to be scrutinized. "Miss Allenby, at last," Lemoyne said, executing a formal bow that never quite bent his proud neck. "I have looked forward to making your acquaintance." She dropped into a practised curtsy, praying her knees would not buckle. "Sir?" A brief, loaded pause, the hush of expectation. "Indeed." "Lady Walchester tells me you are quite musical," he continued, the phrase sliding over his lips so easily. She wondered how often he had wielded it before. "I hope he will favour us later. Your stepfather and I have spoken highly of your accomplishments." She tried to repress the small grimace that threatened, managed instead a demure tilt of her head. "One does what one can," she replied, her voice faint to her own ears, "though I confess my true talent lies in listening to others." His answering smile was smooth. "Practised. I find a good listener most agreeable. Perhaps you will endure my company for a turn about the room." "I would be delighted," she lied, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. The floor beneath her seemed thinner somehow. As they processed past the assembled crowd, Baron Lemoyne initiated the blandest of conversational forays, commenting on the decor, the music, the promise of a good harvest. She responded as etiquette dictated, too aware of the speculative glances, the rustle of taffeta from women older and hungrier than she. They completed their circuit to the applause of society's gaze. As they paused near the open French doors, the Baron's attention drew back to the press of another circle. The regional magistrate's wife had sought him out. Cecily found herself adrift, released, but still tethered to the taut lines of duty. Her stepfather's voice found her like flint catching on stone. "Come, Cecily, you must not leave his company at a critical moment. There are eyes everywhere. Opportunities must be seized or they will not come again." She wanted, absurdly, to run, air pressed close about her skin, heavy with expectation and lavender from the hothouse. With a curtsy to her stepfather, she remained, pinioned to the same spot as the Baron mingled, his warm, practised smile never dimming. The dance invitations began with the brisk efficiency of a market. Names exchanged, hands extended, gloved fingers gripping hers too tightly, as if afraid she might vanish before the song's end. Cecily allowed herself to be led through the opening quadrille. Her partner, a nervous young naval lieutenant, all eager smiles and 2 left feet. At intervals, she scanned the room for Lemoyne, and felt her stepfather's gaze, a silent whip on her shoulders. The night blossomed with distant laughter, bursts of applause, and the sharp, recurring realization that she was both more and less than herself. She was a daughter to be married off, a pawn her stepfather would barter for security and standing. She longed for a quiet corner, a single deep breath away from the vortex of expectation. Her opportunity came at midnight. A breath of coolness snuck in through the open French doors, stirring the petals in the vases and the stray tendrils of Cecily's hair. Drawn by the night air, she edged along the marble gallery, skirts brushing the white and gold panelling, and slipped through the doors into the unlit garden. The difference was immediate. A hush, layered with chirring crickets, the moist musk of earth and fountain stone. Jasmine drifted on a faint breeze, foggier and more intoxicating than any powder or perfume inside. She inhaled greedily, feeling her lungs stretch for the first time all evening. Stars glanced through the dense branches overhead. The garden was designed for lovers and secrets. Labyrinthine hedges, glossy-leafed magnolias, whispering overhead, and winding gravel paths slick with dew. Cecily did not aim for any destination. She let the stillness press into her bones. Her body's tension began to ebb. She leaned against the low granite lip of a dry fountain, letting her gown's hem gather specks of dampness. Her heart was still racing, but in this world of blooms and midnight, she did not, at first, notice she was not alone. A presence merged so completely into the shadows it might have been a trick of moonlight. Only when a twig snapped behind a rosebush did she startle. Turning swiftly, her hand pressed to her throat. A young man stepped hesitantly into a shaft of moonlight. He held his left hand cradled at his waist, the bandages peeking white beneath his black evening coat. His expression was reserved but not unfriendly. The bitter edge of pride lay around his mouth, the way a bruise clings long after its cause. "Forgive me, Miss Allenby," Thaddeus Grufton said softly, his voice roughened by a long-held bitterness. "Had I known the garden was occupied, I might have retreated." Cecily straightened, heat prickling her cheeks with embarrassment and something like indignation. I merely sought air." The ballroom was quite stifling. He smiled faintly, a twitch of amusement rather than joy. "Tonight does have a certain suffocating quality, I admit. Even the statuary seemed ready to faint away." His attempt at levity eased her embarrassment, if only a little. Cecily nodded, glancing at his bandaged hand. "I hope your injury is not too grave?" Thaddeus's grin darkened, pride flaring in his eyes as he tucked the wounded hand behind his back. "Only my reputation is beyond saving, Miss Allenby, not my hand." He paused, the easy humour in his voice curdling into something more acrid. "Though I dare say few care to distinguish between the two these days." She could not meet his gaze for fear she might seem either too intrigued or too insipid. Of course, she had heard the whispers. The Grafton heir, caught wagering at cards, fortune reduced, honour wounded, mother exiled to the countryside. The Grafton ball tonight was his family's attempted redemption reputation to be won or lost on a single waltz or word. "Society has a long memory for scandal," Cecily said, surprised at the boldness in her own response, "and a short one for kindness." He lifted his brows, searching her face as though deciphering a code. "Is that your experience, Miss Allenby, or your hope?" A quivering breath left her. "A little of both, I think." They stood for a time in the silence that only gardens post-midnight can contain, awkward yet full of meaning. Cecily, half tempted to return to the ball, instead found herself lingering. Thaddeus, for all his notorious bravado, seemed shy just now, as if the garden had stripped away a layer of the world's armour. He broke the silence, his voice low. "Are you—" He hesitated, brows drawn together, as though uncertain if the question was permitted. "Are you enjoying yourself truly? Or is your presence as voluntary as mine tonight?" His candour startled, a rueful laugh from her. "I suppose there are balls one attends by choice, but I have yet to discover such a marvel." She shifted, the dew chilling the exposed skin of her wrists. "My stepfather is ambitious. Tonight I am very much what he makes of me. He expects, well, you can guess." "Lemoyne," Thaddeus replied flatly. "He is the North Star of this firmament tonight, if a trifle unsteady on his own axis." The sharpness of his observation surprised her into a smile. "Grafton? Only when the consequences will be negligible by dawn." He paused, looking down at the bandaged hand flexing at his side. "Besides, you strike me as a woman who can bear frankness. The others, I think, prefer poetry and empty promises." She felt a swell of warmth at the compliment, so rare and genuine amid the evening's political theatre. She tilted her head, studying him in turn, the elegant line of his jaw, the shadows beneath his broad cheekbones, the undeniable weariness in his posture. He looked not so much defeated as determined to weather calamity on his own terms. "Are you always so certain of your perceptions?" she asked archly, daring herself to flirt with the danger of his company. His mouth curled. "No, but I find it preferable to the baffled ignorance that passes for wit at these affairs." Laughter, real and shocked, slipped from her. She turned away, lest he see too much of her pleasure, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You make it far too tempting to remain here," she confessed, "but I cannot be missed for long." He sobered at that, his dark eyes lingering over hers. "No, I expect you cannot. Still, I am grateful for your company, Miss Allenby. It makes the garden less empty." A silence hung between them then, heavy with meanings neither of them could articulate. She stepped closer to the path, soft grass cushioning her slippers. "Should you ever wish to be alone again, you might seek the East Rose Arbour," Thaddeus said, voice gentler now. "It is generally abandoned after supper, and the jasmine is especially fine." She thought how easy it would be later in the season to trace that shadowed lane and find herself again outside the world's glare, in the company of a man whose mistakes might just equal her own uncertainties. "Thank you, Mr. Ben." "Grafton," she said, holding his gaze with the fortitude she did not quite possess. I shall remember your advice. A thread of understanding spun between them, a silent pact, a mutual escape. She took her leave, then, heart thrumming with the knowledge that something had shifted, however subtly, in the architecture of her night. She slipped back through the French doors, the clamour of the ballroom crashing down upon her like the surf. Warmth and noise pressed in, a brutal contrast to the serenity outside. Her face felt feverish, and she knew from the glances exchanged as she re-entered that the telltale flush on her cheeks would not go unremarked. Baron Lemoyne materialized at her elbow almost instantly. "Ah, Miss Allonby, I wondered where you had vanished to. The music is just beginning anew. I should be honored if you would join me for the country dance." His words were perfectly chosen, his smile equally so. Cecily dipped her head, avoiding his appraising gaze, and found herself swept onto the dance floor before she'd gathered her thoughts. The musicians struck up the country tune, fiddles lilting, the footfalls of couples pounding a steady rhythm. Cecily's hand, cool with nervousness, was taken in the Baron's much larger one as they joined the figures. He led her with ease, a partner as proficient as any she'd known. But as they stepped and parted, their bodies mirrored in the expanse of the room, Cecily could not banish the lingering ghost of the garden air, nor the echo of Thaddeus Grafton's voice in her ear. "I trust you are enjoying yourself?" Lemoyne inquired, as the pattern brought them briefly face to face again. Voice barely above a whisper, fearing it might crack beneath the strain, he leaned in, his tone tipping toward confidential. "You must not be shy with me, Miss Allonby. I should like to know your thoughts." He meant it as an invitation, but Cicely recognized it for what it was, a test, a chance to display charm without overt cleverness, a chance to please. "My thoughts," she said slowly, baring her teeth in something that must pass for a smile. "I am only grateful for such company and setting." He seemed satisfied, his attention drifting across the floor, as if already bored of her. They spun through the last figures, her mind miles distant, among shadows, perfume, and tentative confidences. Against her will, her thoughts returned to the garden, the breathless quiet, Thaddeus's wounded hand, the shrewd glance of a man with more to lose than to gain. When the dance ended, Baron Lemoyne returned her to the side of the room where her stepfather awaited, expectation flickering coldly in his eyes. "You danced well," Lord Allonby intoned with clipped satisfaction, "though you might do better to appear less nervous." "I was not nervous," Cecily replied softly. "Only warm." Her stepfather's expression softened not a jot. "We must be vigilant, Cecily. The Baron is courted by everyone. They will snap him up if we are lethargic. He has expressed interest in a walk to view the conservatory at tomorrow's assembly. You will accept." An almost smile parted her lips, but she knew better than to voice her rebellion. "As you say, sir." He patted her hand. His gesture meant kindly, but heavy with the power he wielded. "Good girl." The rest of the evening blurred into a succession of dances, empty compliments, laughter that grated her ears. The crowd began to thin, voices growing hoarse and revellers retreating to carriages called to the door. Cecily waited dutifully for the final polite farewells, her compliance impeccable. Only alone, in the privacy of her carriage with her stepfather dozing under his brandy-laced breath, did Cecily close her eyes and let herself drift, not to the prospect of Lemoyne and his fortune, but to the scent of jasmine, the imperfect honest darkness of the Grafton Gardens. Not a pawn, but a person. Dawn crept over the city in feathers of pale pink, turning the familiar lines of the Allonby townhouse into something both hopeful and intimidating. Cecily hurried through her morning toilette, sidestepping the fussy attentions of her maid, her mind still full of the previous night's conversations, playing, and replaying each word as she watched her reflection, pale solemn, her eyes too dark. She descended the curving stairs to the formal drawing-room, where bouquets from the previous day's callers still scented the air with dying sweetness. The morning post had arrived, stacked neatly on a silver tray, letters from her cousins, an invitation gilded in blue, and one small bundle of violets tied with a crisp card. The card was from Baron Lemoyne. She read it quickly, empty pleasantries in a neat, masculine hand, offering his compliments and congratulating her on her exquisite performance at the ball, as if she had been an act rather than a partner. He wrote that he would hope to see her again at the assembly, and that her playing at the pianoforte was considered the highlight of the evening. Cecily tried to picture him writing it, and failed. The phrases smacked of a secretary's efficiency, not the sincerity of a hopeful suitor. Her stepfather entered, his footsteps brisk, the lines around his mouth even deeper in the morning light. "You have news from Lemoyne, I trust." She handed him the card. He read it twice, face expressionless, and handed it back to her. "That is good. He will call again before the week is out, I guarantee it. You must not waste your opportunity, Cecily. Every family with property is poised to tempt him. He needs a gentle soul and a quick mind, though not so quick as to seem unmanageable. Do you understand me?" Cecily inclined her head, feeling as though every muscle in her back had been laced taut with invisible ribbon. She slipped the card back into her reticule, but the Baron's name shimmered behind her eyelids, half possibility, half prison. The week unfurled with all the ordered anticipation of a regiment's parade, and when Sunday at last presented itself, it did so with pale sunlight and the uncommon promise